So, ladies and gentlemen, our keynote address, the head of digital at Little Red Jet. Please make him very welcome. He's now taken in all the alpha material and he's resonating. Please make him very welcome. Luke Young.
Thank you. It's great to be back at Money in Sport, and thank you to the guys at Tribal for allowing me to talk today on Gen Z and the future of content for this generation. A quick little background about myself. I've been over in the US for the last couple of years working with athletes and brands on how they can best understand Gen Z, who they are, and why it's important to the sports industry. As over the next 5, 10, 15 years, they'll be the consumers that we want. So who they are. Gen Z is a generation that are born between 1995 and 2009, approximately putting them between 8 and 22 years old. So when we talk about sport, we're talking about this next generation, the 10-year-olds, how they're consuming content and media. 1 in 2 will get a university degree, and by 2025, they'll make up 27% of the workforce. They're very educated and informed when they're making buying decisions. They're predicted to work 17 jobs, 5 careers, and live in 15 homes over their lifetime. By 2022, they will account for 40% of all consumers in the market. They'll influence 600 billion of family spending, and they have an attention span of 8 seconds. Often they have 5 devices. So whether it be their iPhone, their tablet, TV screen, computer screen, they've often owned 5 of those digital devices. 96% own a smartphone, and 50% of them can't live without YouTube. And 1 in 2 will try a trick shot that they see an athlete do themselves. So how many of you in the room today have a strategy to talk to this generation? How many of you are creating meaningful content for them? How many of you are ensuring that you connect with them over the next 20 years because they are going to be your avid fans and consumers? And how many of you haven't even considered this generation at all? Last year, the Vikings hired an 18-year-old to help them understand this generation. And this is something very important that we here in Australia now need to start to do more of, to listen to the people we're trying to talk to. So I want to leave you with a note before we bring up our panel members. We may not be your core consumers now, but over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we're going to be the avid spenders, your avid fans, and you need to start thinking about us now. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists onto the stage so we can start talking about the content for the new generation. So I'd just like to start by introducing everyone and then maybe go into a bit about yourself and what you do and what you're working on at the moment. So we've got Debs here from Fox Sports. Deb?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for having me again. Tribal Sports and Money in Sport, 2nd year running. I'm the commercial manager for all things digital at Fox Sports.
Great. Alita, Milk It.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, guys, for having me again. I'm really happy to be here. Milk It Academy specialises in training, strategy and consulting. We train teams to become consultants within the organisations that they work in. Everything's completely customised, and we run everything around a concept called Agile methodology. It's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, so I'll make sure that I use it carefully. And design thinking as well, so I'll be talking a little bit about that today.
Great. And Glen, LaLiga?
Thanks, Luke, and thanks to Money in Sport for having me here. My name's Glen Rolls, and I represent LaLiga, so that's the Spanish football competition for those of you that don't know. I represent them in the Australian and New Zealand markets.
And Tony?
Yeah, it's good to be back. Comes around quick, but yeah, look, I'm now Perth Glory as CEO. Been there since the end of May, and yeah, just trying to get used to living out the west.
Well, guys, let's get into it. We've got Generation Z, attention span, 8 seconds. They're on 5 devices. What platforms do we need to be on? The Instagrams, the Snapchats, the Facebooks. Where do we start? And as a club, as a brand, as an advertiser, where do you start? Do you pick one? Do you pick them all? Deb, what are you doing in the space in general?
Interesting question, and something we always get asked. Where do you be? Do you make it relevant for your own brand, or are you like an octopus at an orgy? Are you on every single one of them? My view and what we've done at Fox Sports is we've cherry-picked the ones that would be most relevant to our audience and invested quite heavily in that space, and then also kind of experimented in more of the adjacency side, and then gradually built that up over time. In terms of investing in that space, look, it's not only from an advertising and commercialization aspect, but also making sure we've got the OpEx to reach those fans on all of those properties as well. For example, things like Apple News. Right now, we have close to 1 million customers on that particular platform, and I guarantee you not every single one of them are Foxtel or Fox Sports subscribers. But do you know what? It's our job to always talk to them, always engage with them, always send out contextual notifications to them, and make sure we keep on surprising and delighting them throughout their entire journey. That, do you know what, one day when they are ready to become a full-fledged subscriber, that they'll always keep us top of mind.
Yep, and Alita, you know, with so many platforms, the messaging obviously has to be different. How do we need to change what we're talking about on Facebook versus Instagram and onto Snap and everything else?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how, with the research that we've done, how that the Gen Z use different platforms around the world. So in South America, for example, there's still a really high adoption rate of Gen Z using Facebook. They use a little bit of Instagram, not too much Snapchat, they're still using Facebook, Gen Z. In Australia, if you talk to somebody that is a Gen Z about Facebook, they look at you funny like you're a grandmother. So they really, in Australia, for example, they really are all over Instagram and they're all over Snapchat. So I think that, you know, you need to find out where people are at, how they're using it, and tailor your content to the channel and also the region.
Great, and we recently did a study about the teams within each of the leagues and the type of content that they're pushing, and we found that compared to a lot of leagues overseas, Australians aren't producing for social as much video content as photos. Is that something that we need to be more wary of and start producing more engaging content that, you know, we can watch over 3-4 seconds versus just a static image?
Yep, well, I probably can't really speak for the local markets and the local competitions. I guess Tony could probably delve more into that. But I guess from our point of view at LaLiga, we certainly produce content over every platform, so all of our digital platforms, whether that's our applications, our games, obviously social media. We're across every social media platform there is. A very strong following. I think it's we've got about 65 million across all of our social media platforms. And I think Alita raises a very good point when she says that you have to sort of really analyse market to market. So we've implemented what we call our global strategy. So basically that means, you know, it's not rocket science, you know, global, local. But so to delve more into that, we produce, I guess, content on a global basis that touches, you know, the 4 corners of the globe, and that is very relevant to every market. So I mean, that's just, you know, goals from Messi, goals from Griezmann, etc., etc. I mean, that's very, I guess, appealing and attractive on a global scale. And then I guess why I'm here in Australia, we tend to delve more and analyse the more, you know, the markets from market to market, and look at how we can produce content that is relevant to the local market that we want to, I guess, penetrate. So, for example, in Australia, even though the primary language is spoken, you know, it's English, same in England, but the markets are different, and how people consume not only the football content, but also the digital content is pretty different. Like, there are some similarities, but it's pretty different. So it's all about coming up with strategies, coming up with content that's locally relevant, locally engaging, analysing what, I guess, platforms are the most engaging, and yeah, going right for those platforms. So.
Yep. And Tony, obviously, stepping into the new role, is it something that you do an audit of when you go in and check out everything that's happening on your channels and see what needs to happen or to change?
Yeah, look, times have changed. I've been involved in the A-League, since 2007, and we've hired our full-time videographer, excuse me, who produces content. We're training every day, taking videos, photos as well, uploading, and I'm very mindful that we go across all channels, because there's still, we've still got a large number of people using Facebook, Insta, Twitter. On the weekend, I've got two Gen Z kids. They're 20 and 23, and I rang him. I said, "Oh, did you see Connor Media score the winner? How good was it?" He goes, "Yeah, I was following it on Twitter, and I watched the clip of the goal. It was great." But they will never sit down, and it's something that we've been having a chat with Fox Sports, because the ratings, aren't fantastic, and it's trying to get our demographic, which are these kids, to sit down. They won't sit down and watch a whole game. They won't sit down and turn it on, but they will follow it. They do follow it through their apps, through Twitter, through Instagram, through Facebook. So, when we do upload content, you have to go across all those platforms, and we have to invest more into that social media, build our social media departments as well now, and where we used to advertise games through newspapers and all that sort of stuff, we don't do that anymore, because the way forward now is about just connecting with these, I suppose, this generation through media platforms, which also then is hard against, when you got the chairman who thinks, you put it in the paper and it does its job. Well, it doesn't. So you've got to try and educate the older generation as well. So it's challenging.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I think something that's really interesting that's happening with Facebook, that's been happening over the last 12 months, is Facebook TV, and of course the introduction of Facebook Stories. We all know who they stole it from. It's not a secret, and they've been really open about it, but Mark Zuckerberg constantly is talking in the media about how important bite-sized content is for the new generation. They've just invested $81 billion over the last 12 months just dedicated to video marketing. In 2020, they're going to be gearing their entire algorithm to primarily showing video content. At the moment, it's a real mix about how they're sharing the content. They're starting to change the algorithm, gear it to be more meaningful interactions or more meaningful content. And Mark Zuckerberg himself says, "I don't really know what meaningful content is." It's definitely a moving goalpost for us, but video is going to be the most important content strategy that you can invest in over the next 5 years.
That's something that's interesting, obviously, with so much content now available on any channel that you're watching. How do you make it meaningful, and how do you make it interesting? Because I feel, in a lot of discussions I've had, you can have good content, you can have bad content, but it's how do you make it interesting, and how do you make it interesting for these fans that want to then come back and continue to watch?
Yeah, I guess just adding on the point that I said before, of our local strategy and making it very relevant for the local markets that we're in. I was very pleased to see the stat before for the tricksters, the trick shot people with the Generation Z copying those tricks, the percentages there. So, that's part of my work, is to identify local influencers here in Australia. We don't currently have any, no, sorry, I tell a lie. We have two Matildas playing over in Spain currently in the women's comp, which is fantastic. And we don't have any senior males playing in the elite football of Spain. So it's really about looking at different ways that we can use, I guess, local talent and local influencers or tricksters or whatever, and to be honest, we have two that we work with here. One's a kid from down the road here in Toowoomba, so it doesn't really get much more, I guess, relevant than that. And one supports Real Madrid and one Barca. So, just using their their content and using their platforms, you can sort of reach these markets, a lot easier.
I really think that there's a couple of different ways to do this. One of them is through player engagement, obviously. We're now seeing the trend, of course, it's been happening for a number of years, is that we've seen players become real celebrities. That's one piece, is that we want to engage with people, engage with our players differently, and the people that are there for the sport, really. But then we've got the other side of things, is this meaningful content. And really, we define that by what's going to add value to the people that we're sharing the content with. And I think that it's really dangerous to only have a conversation about Gen Z, because content is about a connected generation. And whilst Gen Z is great and we can get this great engagement, they are only there for engagement. They haven't started putting money into our economy yet. So we really need to think about how we're producing content for the millennials and all of the other generations, because everybody's using the internet. How they use it is completely different, and it's about how we can really have a commercial impact for our content. Can I pull up one of these slides? Is that okay? Can I just share this one?
Can we pull up?
I think I need a clicker.
There it is.
Yeah, awesome. But go back to one. Yeah, so we actually use this. I wanted to share this with you so that you can get a bit of a visual and write down the process of how we actually produce meaningful content. We've used this methodology to transform content for sports teams and Tennis Australia, and we're kicking off a program with Tennis Queensland at the moment. And what we do is really, we start with empathising with our customer. Who are they? What are they invested in? What are they purchasing? And where are the pain points in their purchasing cycle? What content are we not giving them that's actually going to add value to their life? We then define the exact problem by communicating with our people. We saw with the Vikings who had hired an 18-year-old. We don't need to hire 18-year-olds. You all have 18-year-olds around you. You all have 25-year-olds around you. You all have 30-year-olds. You all have 40, 50, 60. Whoever you want to evolve that content for, you have those people in your network, or you know where to find them to go and communicate with them to really define the problem that you're trying to solve. Then we bring them together, we work together as a team, and we ideate a whole bunch of different solutions to this problem. Then we create a couple of different prototypes, because we can all sit there as very highly paid executives and be, yeah, my idea is the greatest one, but the problem with that is that we're just one person or we're one team, we're completely removed from the people that we're actually trying to create content for. Then we want to move into testing those prototypes to see which one actually really works for us, and then find the one that works the best, that's got the best cut through and the best engagement, and then we implement that strategy. This is a design thinking method. It is fueling innovation across the world, and it's something that we really need, us as executives need to get ourselves skilled up on, because it can transform the conversation that we have with sponsors, it can transform the revenue streams that we have with sponsors as well, and it can transform the way that we actually engage with fans. And the challenge there with fans that this actually helps us to solve is that we're usually kind of restricted by geolocation, and we're restricted, it's a hereditary thing, it's something that our family has come up and been supporting. How can we actually expand that? I mentioned it last year about how much of a great job Richmond Football Clubs does by expanding and looking at new revenue opportunities, using things like design thinking to have meaningful content and meaningful impact for their fans, and expanding that base as well.
Tony, are you engaging the younger generation and having conversations with them to, when you're putting your plans together for the next 5 years, are you talking to them currently?
Yeah, we get a lot of feedback, but I think to the point as well is that, we need to also give content to people who are actually putting money into the club as well, to the older sort of members who need content as well. So it is a balancing act, but we know that the demographic of this age bracket is something that we need to target more and more, and we've got those people around us. I've got kids that age. We've got players, around that 18 to 20, and what we're trying to do is get our players to engage a lot more, to use these social media platforms to get out to the fans, etc. Because yeah, it's great for the club, but these are the heroes that we want to make for the fans. And you know, some players are accepting it. Some find it a bit of a challenge, especially in our game. But more and more is now starting to develop their own brands out there using these platforms.
Yep. And I guess to continue on, Tony, you know, when we talk about budgets in sport and then trying to engage these, you know, the next generation on different platforms, are you finding that you're pushing your budgets into alternate areas now and not just traditional, you know, TV, newspaper, radio? Yeah, definitely. You know, we don't do any, I suppose, newspaper ads anymore. We still use radio. It's a good medium because it gives an opportunity for for our players to go into the sort of radio shows. But it is more just social. It's more still Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They're the sort of stuff, and you know where your fans go and what they like, what they don't like, so you can actually target, and it's a lot cheaper, and it does stretch your budget a lot more, and then you can utilise that money. As I said, you know, we've hired a videographer who works full time for the club, who takes videos. You can get it, take a training session, for example, clip it up, send it out straight away, and we've engaged with a lot of fans through Instagram, for example. Yep. Deb, you're doing quite a bit in switching your budgets into certain areas. Do you want to touch on that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you said switching, we're actually not switching. We're rather just having to dig deeper and be across different platforms as well. Can I just get a quick show of hands? Does anyone at home or at work have a home audio, a smart speaker, basically, like a Google Home or an Alexa? Yeah, cool. So anecdotally, so right now, smart speakers only make up for about 500,000 households in the country. We saw a massive opportunity in this particular space, and it was so much so that my 4-year-old now can't actually turn a TV on or off without using a smart speaker. She intuitively does not know what a remote is. The other day, the internet died, and she couldn't turn the TV on and just lost her mind. It's these new kind of technologies which, okay, she's 4, she's not 10, but in 20 years she'll be the one starting, obviously, in the workforce and starting to contribute to the economy. So long story short, Fox Sports invested in delivering news bulletins and sport content to these connected devices because we know by 2021 it'll penetrate well over 3 million households. So what better way to connect with basically newer customers who you wouldn't obviously connect with through more traditional means, basically.
And once we start to connect with them and we bring them into the system, Tony, obviously traditionally membership offerings have been quite simple. It's your home games, your away games, the offering of what you're getting as your add-ons, hats, scarves, beanies. How do we need to start thinking about this next generation coming through, whether they are just a digital fan, and what is the new membership offering that we need to be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, I know some, I don't think in the A-League, but I know some clubs in Europe, make people pay to get the digital information. We just sort of give it as part of sort of a membership offering, but that is the way of the future. That you can have that sort of membership as well, but it's also trying to get sort of the money out of this generation. At the moment, we're about growing the brand, growing the game. So we are giving it, as part of, the service. But in future, yeah, it's possible that we need to start charging for that.
Yep. And Glen, how are you differentiating between your, I guess, membership base versus, your fans and anyone else that just sort of is following you as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's a key point. I think Alita touched on it again before. It's all well and good having the data and receiving the data and I guess looking at who's engaging with what platform, and what market and so forth. But it's actually sort of analysing that data, understanding it, regurgitating it, and then making better decisions, both business decisions and of course, content decisions that you can again deliver to those people. In terms of us here, we have a partnership with Microsoft. So they give us it's a very good partnership that we have with them. They give us an analytical tool that we can use, and that gives us the power, I guess, to analyze what platforms are the most engaging, where they are being the most engaging in terms of the countries and the markets, and also the demographics as well. So, I mean, that's very, very important for us. And it's something that we, it's like gold for us to be making those decisions.
Are there new metrics that you're tracking that have changed over the last few years that others in the room need to be aware of?
Probably not, to be honest. I mean, it is very digital based at the moment. And as Tony said, those traditional methods of, how you sort of reach your fans and potential fans, I think it's already changed, and it continues to change. We do a lot of different CRM activities, campaigns that are very useful for us, and not only to, obtain data from our fans and potential fans, but also to push our other products. So I guess, people think of LaLiga, some people think of just Real Madrid and Barca. So one of our challenges and one of our, main goals is to focus on the brand LaLiga and the other clubs, and to push our other clubs. So a big focus has been on that. So using matches such as the Catalan Derby, the Madrid Derby, the Seville Derby, other very engaging products. And we can sort of use, that data, that CRM information to spread the brand of our other teams in Spain.
Great. And obviously, Deb, when we get into this generation, they prefer watching highlights over watching full games. Obviously, this year we saw the NBA launch their sort of 12-minute pass during the finals. What sort of things are you doing to, combat or allow for these fans to then get that type of information?
Yeah, definitely interesting question. For starters, it's not only these fans. I'm 34, I have literally no free time, and I can't remember when I watched a game siren to siren. So I need those 12-minute cut downs, I need those 15-minute highlights, I need the 30-second Snapchat vertical videos as well. What we've recently launched in the market, which some of you might have read already, was KO, basically. So it was basically the Netflix of sports. So no longer do you have to be a Foxtel subscriber and buy a set-top box, but similar to a Netflix model, we've done a direct-to-consumer offering. So that basically means as a sport customer for $25 or $35 a month, you can get unlimited sport through two to four devices. But that's all good and well. You can just take a linear channel and broadcast it over IP, but we had to listen basically to our customer segments, who we wanted to eventually grow over the years, and that was mainly around that the 18 to 35s, who, do you know what? They're not going to spend $140 a month on sport content, but what they will do is part with some money if it's a decent product. And what we basically did was we looked at how we could take multi-sport viewing, so watching 4 screens up to a certain time, allowing machine learning in and around personalization as well. So following your teams, and also allowing the app not allowing you to show spoilers, for example. So catching up with sport basically after the fact. And do you know what? We're in it for the long haul as well. We give away we give 2 weeks away for free. And we know there's a bit of a risk to it, but you know what? You need to basically invest in these customers even before they're opening their wallets to you as well.
And Alita, you mentioned earlier, obviously Facebook doing more live, more stories. Obviously Instagram TV now as well. Longer form content, vertical video. What do teams, leagues, sponsors need to be doing on these platforms, and how do we track these new engagement levels?
Yeah, I think one of the things we haven't talked about yet is segmenting of content, and that's what creates meaning as well, is making sure that message is to the right person at the right time, based on previous interactions. AI is really helping us to transform the way we create and produce and release meaningful content. I think a really great example is with stadium tech and content. And it's not particularly one of those places that you really think that content kind of lives, but it does, most certainly. For example, IBM have just rolled out some stadium tech where you go, when you're sitting in your seat, you have the app downloaded, they know exactly where you're sitting, and there's a break in the game, and they say, okay, do you want to go and eat food? Do you want to go to the bathroom? Don't go this way, go that way. Based on where your seat is, here's the best way to get there. That's a real piece of meaningful content that's totally segmented to that person at that time on the right device to give them the best possible customer experience. And that's what you really need to be thinking about when you're producing your content. How is this going to support our customer experience? How is this going to help them to fall in love with us more? How is this going to help us pass the good old barbecue test? Is this something that people really speak positively about? So I think, starting off with, we need to ask a lot more questions. We need to have a process to using that information in a meaningful way. You need to set very, very clear objectives about what content is going to be released on what channels to what people at what time. And as far as the metrics go, that comes down to your objective. For example, we've just started changing a lot of metrics from tracking impressions and eyeballs and things like that to tracking how is this impacting us commercially, to not just a single transaction, but also the average order value, because one transaction can be worth $30. But if we really want to increase that commercial value of that person, we really want to be looking at how we can change the average order value, or how we can increase the lifetime value of that fan. And that's really where we need to start focusing our efforts and focusing where we're tracking things. It really comes down to having a very solid objective.
Yep, and Glenn, obviously talking about trick shots relating to the audience, what else are you doing in that market for, I guess, experiences? Because obviously that plays a big part of whether it be people in stadiums now or offering them something that they can't have. What are you doing or seeing in that space?
Yeah, I think, touching on it before with the influencers, that's something that we're doing and we continue to do. We work very closely with our broadcaster here in Australia, beIN Sports, so it's very important working with them and having a good relationship with them, having our matches across their platform. You can now see 10 of our matches out of the 10 matches, not only on live channels but also OTT. So with the rewind mode, you can you don't have to get up at 3 in the morning. You can get up at 5:30 or 6, which is still pretty early for me, but and chuck it on rewind and watch the matches. And also that content is broken down, such as as Deb said before. I think. Other experiences that we do, with our broadcaster, we do what we call the LaLiga Santander experience. So every season we offer our broadcaster the chance to go over to Spain to experience a match, because it's all well and good, I guess, the local fans here in Australia watching all the content over all the different platforms, but if they can't actually experience it and watch one of their own, like an Australian, going over there and experiencing one of the matches, then they sort of don't associate themselves with that content. So it's actually next week. So a member of our broadcaster is going across to Barcelona. They're going to watch Espanyol versus FC Barcelona. And one of the influencers that I mentioned before is accompanying them. So through that, we're going to be able to record a lot of content. And the Australian fans, especially the young fans across Instagram and Facebook, will be able to see firsthand how that match is experienced, and hopefully that can resonate more with the fans here in Australia.
Great. We've got some questions coming through, so remember to hashtag MIS2018. Tony, obviously sponsors play a big part in the teams and the leagues. Looking overseas and the use of social and sponsors, I guess, trying to now engage with these large fan bases that teams have on social. you've got the NFL doing 700 odd posts a month on their Instagram page versus sort of the AFL, NRL leagues doing 60 a month. Are we doing not enough? Do we need to be doing more? And are you finding some of your sponsors now wanting to, I guess, piggyback on the messages that you're pushing through social?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you get your sponsorship measurements through, whatever, company you use, whether it's Futures or Gemba or, in the past it's all about, being the logo on the television, etc. That was a large part, but now there's also the social media, the internet and websites and what that brings. So, we need to do a lot more on that side to give that benefit to sponsors. So it's starting, but we need to do a lot more.
I've got some quotes here from some Gen Z, which I'll just read out so then we can follow with the question. New emerging sports have big potential, and advertisers or sponsors could determine the brand that people associate with the sport or sports star. From Eric, 19. When a brand supports a non-traditional sport, it tells me that they are aware of the up-and-coming nature of the sport and aren't afraid to ask questions. Isaac, 15. Brands that advertise or sponsor non-traditional sports are trying to diversify. They want to reach out. I think it's very important how Red Bull uses Ninja in Fortnite. Obviously, the framework for sponsorship is changing, and how the sponsors are talking to potential fans. Alita, where do sponsors start?
Oh, great question. I think that where the sponsors start is really understanding the fan base better, what they need, who they are, what they can enhance for them. So, for example, like I was telling you last night, is if we have a banking, if we're going after a sponsor that's in banking, why don't we find out about our fans and see how many of those have credit cards? Then let's also find out how many of those people who have credit cards that are our fans are willing to change their credit card provider if us as a team can get you a better deal. Then we start to look at things like branded credit cards. So one of the questions that just came up here was about how do we as a team engage with our fans better. Is that what the question was? Can we get that back up? And really, it is about integrating that content into people's day-to-day transactions. So, what if I was going to pay with a Richmond Visa card, for example, as opposed to just playing? Virgin has their Visa card. It's a piece of content. It's a piece of content that I carry around with me. It's a piece of content that I transact with all the time. If it costs them $100 for a click on the word credit card, and we can go to our sponsors with a great story saying, "Hey, there's 70% of our fan base has a credit card and 50% of them are willing to change if we can get them a better deal," then we're changing the conversation with sponsors out of impressions and logos on tops further into how can we integrate this content into people's day-to-day lives. So the place to start, in simple terms, is asking questions and validating those questions and finding out who we can actually get the buy-in from.
Debs, you getting sponsors now trying to take over your Instagram pages, your Snapchats versus your in-app advertising?
Yeah, 100%. And do you know what? Long gone are the days of spending an obscene amount of money on a 15 or 30-second spot and just doing a spray and pray. It's all about that return on investment and that very, very much deeper level of integration. I think what we always tell our sponsors is basically come on the journey with us. If we're signed up to one KPI or a shared objective, we're definitely going to service each other a lot better. And I think at the end of the day, what they've got to also look at is, for example, if you're trying to sell a Ferrari, don't market it to a 50-year-old, market it to a 15-year-old.
And
or an alpha, sorry, I should say.
When it comes to game day, pre-season, post-season finals, are the sponsors trying to push different messages? Are you trying to push different messages, and the type of content that you're producing is different?
Yes, 100%. I think, Alita, you mentioned it before in and around just having that very, very clear vision and objective. Sport, as you all know, isn't just those 90 minutes, siren to siren or whistle to whistle. It's that week-long, month-long, year-long, season-long conversation, which is always going on. So there'll always be brands who'll come on board and they'll just want to jump on board in and around what does a pre-game sort of content strategy look like? Is it around that analysis piece? Is it, which basically means a lot of, for example, the bookmakers love that pre-game stuff because they can basically jump on board in and around that expert commentary and push their message as well. It also means we're able to work directly with them and have a mutually beneficial partnership where we say we obviously have all of the expertise, but you know what? You've got the statistical backing as well. Can you give us a bit of content as well, and can we present this to our customers? And then when it comes to post game, you know, everyone here is basically a pundit and has an expert view on what happened in the game. So there's no shortage of brands who basically want to come on board and be on that journey, but also be on that very, very brand safe journey as well.
And Tony, when it comes to game day, if you're winning, losing throughout the season, does the messaging change for you from a content perspective? And does it obviously then change for if you are losing? Do you need to sell more tickets? So are you upping your social spends, or is it no, we need to focus on other areas?
No, not really. You know, we probably keep it consistent. You know, we do a lot of pre-match activity. You know, when the players come out, you know, we sort of do that live as well. You know, we do the press conferences live, but you know, we wouldn't change our strategy whether we win or lose. It's about content, and as Deb said, it's not just game day. It's, you know, basically as the game finishes, one game you roll into the next, and you've got training and press conferences, etc. And it's that whole week of getting that message out. And you know, hopefully that sort of starts to, you know, filter through all the platforms.
And obviously, the generation now wants more content, more stats, more often. You know, with athletes being such a big part of the sport and often having bigger social followings than some of the teams, do you find it interesting that we're still not utilising the athletes enough for training them or teaching them what they could be doing on social media? I mean, the NFL and NBA guys spoke about it earlier this morning of how important it is as a marketing channel, yet they're not using it.
Yeah, look, in our code in football, there's, you know, some you know, great athletes who really use the social media well. You know, everyone probably knows Tim Cahill and how he sort of goes on his you know, social media platforms. But what we are trying to do is get our players to do a lot more. Some do it well, but it's also getting them out of their comfort zone to actually do social media, and we will promote them as well. I think one of the questions before that was, how do you promote your club brand versus your individual brand? And excuse me, yeah, so it is a balancing act, but you know, we will try and promote our players, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that will sell tickets, because they're the ones, you know, people want to go see. You know, we've got probably the best women player in the world, Sam Kerr, and you know, we try and use her a lot in our platforms, and she's very receptive to that as well. And you know, whenever we can, we sort of promote her, and that helps her profile and helps the clubs as well.
I've just got some numbers here from AFL specifically, so we can do a little bit of a comparison. We've got players like Dustin Martin with 250,000 followers on Instagram. He's done 15 posts in 12 months. Steel Sidebottom, 30,000 followers, 18 posts in 12 months. Jack Zeeble, 25,000 followers, 40 posts. Buddy Franklin, 72 posts. Gary Ablett, 25 posts. And then we jump across over into America, and we've got, you know, Odell Beckham doing 250 posts in 12 months. LeBron James doing 200 posts in 12 months. is it an understanding that we need to teach our players that they can be doing more? Because it obviously comes back to getting the message out that the club can push, help with sponsors getting more money. Is there a misunderstanding, or do the players need some training or coaching like they do have on the field?
Yeah, look, we are trying to, but a lot of the players also anti-social media because, you know, they have a bad game. You know, the keyboard warriors are out, and we've had issues with players who've had to actually delete their social media platforms because of the hate they get. So, you know, they've got to be, you know, basically, you know, sort of tough to, you know, sit there and read it all. And sometimes it's a balancing act. You know, we basically say, look, just delete and just keep going. But you know, more and more players are now starting to you know, get on Instagram, Twitter. They might not post, but they'll do a lot of stories, and that's the way forward now. They'll do a story of a game or something like that. But we need to do more with them because, as I said before, they're the people that we want to promote to the fans, and that's how, you know, the fans are going to get to the games.
A couple of questions have come in. Deb, this one's probably suited to you. What projections do you have in traditional Foxtel subscribers abandoning for the new platforms?
Great question from B. Fosterable. Where are you, by the way? There you go. To answer your question in two parts, yes, we do have projections, and two, I won't tell you them. And it's obviously for various confidentiality reasons, but there's no surprises. There will be customers and leaving that traditional set-top box and going to the IP services. But frankly, do you know what? As a business, as all businesses, you need to be basically in this space. We like to look at it in sort of two ways. You've still got your very more premium kind of offering, which is sort of like if you ever look at a Qantas, for example. You are paying a little bit more, but do you know what? You are getting just that little bit extra service, a little bit more features, which is typically like the set-top box offering. With KO, for example, it's a more agile service. You don't have necessarily all the features that you would with the set-top box offering. So, you know, you could liken that to almost like a Jetstar. Great value. But not with necessarily all the bells and whistles. As a business, it's great because you know what, you've got two sort of key products, and it keeps everyone honest. You've effectively got two competing business units, effectively competing with each other, but working towards one goal as well. I'm happy to chat to you more about that one later as well.
And guys, a closing statement of what do you think is next for this generation and the content that people in the room need to be thinking about?
Well, from my perspective, it's really all about the customer's journey and how we're interacting from that perspective. I mean, the customer journey is really important because that's what creates loyalty, and that's what we really need to strive towards. So create stuff that's really meaningful, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, I think from my point of view and from LaLiga's point of view, it's about becoming or continuing to be as innovative as possible. I think you have to have that ability to adapt to any sort of situation, and you know, technology, it comes and it goes and it improves year on year out, you know. So I mean, you have to be really on top of everything. Know your customer in terms, you know, for us it's knowing our fan, know what kind of content they want, how they want to consume it, and yeah, I mean, just make sort of, you know, decisions based on all of that.
Just to continue on your point, Glenn, is content's always been around, let's be honest. It's hundreds of thousands of obviously millions of years. Just be authentic in the way you deliver it, basically. Know your customers and deliver it in the most honest way. Don't try and bullshit them. They'll tear you an absolute new one. We're talking about esports later today. That is a very, very unforgiving space if you're inauthentic. So authenticity is 100% key. I know everyone kind of gets caught up in, you know, do I create VR experiences? Do I do this? Do I do that? do you know what? If you know your audience and deliver an authentic experience and connect with them on an emotional level, it'll just go in leaps and bounds.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've all said it, have a good understanding of what customers want, and don't be afraid to go out and ask questions and research and keep up with the latest trends. You know, overseas, some companies, some clubs, you know, from our point of view, do it really well. So learn from them and, you know, give your customers what they want.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining me today in chatting about the content for the new generation. Would everyone help me give them a round of applause? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Luke. Luke Young with Debs Majumdar from Fox Sports, Tony Pignata from Perth Glory, Alita Harvey-Rodriguez from the Milkett Academy, and Glen Rolls, of course, from LaLiga.